Happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm so glad you're here and your smiling faces. You've made it through Monday. Yes. So, last week I met up with my BFF, Nikki. Nikki was so ecstatic and left our meeting so confident in seaming a sweater or seaming in general that she offered to seam the sweater that I've been creating. And I told her I hated to burst her bubble, and then she understood because I was like, I need to show this to you guys. And my process and how I taught her to be more confident in seaming and the different stitch techniques required to have a beautiful seam. So thank you, Nikki. I do apologize for not allowing you to seam this up for me, but when in doubt, if you forget anything that I've taught you, come back to this video and it'll refresh your memory. So let's get started. All right, we're overhead. Wonder how many times I'm gonna hit my head off of this. I don't know. So as in the pictures that you saw previously of Nikki, and I can show you again, it is imperative to wash and block your pieces because you can prevent most of it from curling. You can see that this curled a little bit on me. I'm not too worried about it, but by pinning it, pinning my shoulders, again, I did not follow the pattern. I have 10 stitches on here. I know that I need 10 stitches to close this off. Again, I know what I ended up here. I did pin this. How did I pin this? What? I'll show you. Now I tucked it away a little bit here. And if you can see, that's my start of my round. And I should have closed that off, but I'll do that right before I start seaming to close this off. This is the bottom part of the sleeve where I did all the increases. Again, I did not follow the pattern. I knitted it in the round. So I'll close that off. But since this is the bottom part of the sleeve, I want this to match up and meet up to the side seam. So I took the sleeve in half and estimated and just pinned and loosely pinned these around, aligning up some stitches. So that way here, when I go to the side seam, as you can tell, once I pull this over, this all gets together, it's going to meet up pretty well. And I think I'll be happy with it. I can always move my pins as necessary or vice versa. But it's a pain when you start and you just dive in seaming it and then you're like off really bad and your increases are not on the under part of your sleeve. So that's why I pinned first, because they're movable and they remove very easily compared to stitches. So let's get into talking about stitches. So I'm going to put a link in the description below because I pulled this off and I like helping you guys out so that you're not scouring the internet for hours and hours to find the information you need. So I'll put the link in the description below about the different stitch techniques needed, and I'll explain these as I go on, because in this case you're going to have to make a purl stitch from this knit to knit on this rib on this sweater, and most sweaters that's what you're going to have to do. So essentially you're taking that in. You're also going to be doing an easy peasy, let's see if I can show you real quick. These ones you take and pull apart just like when you're knitting and you want to make one left or make one right, you go into the bar. So all you're doing essentially is taking this bar to the corresponding bar on the other side and weaving it together. Same way here, you're creating another knit stitch, almost like the Kirchner stitch if you would have live stitches here, but you do not have live stitches here. If I would have left these live, I could have done that stitch. So essentially, there's different stitch techniques for every seam. So I did seam up the side that Nikki did, and it looks pretty darn good. Let's look at the inside. And as you can see, it's all consistent, and that's what you want. And that's why I pin, for consistency. So that way here, every seam is the same and it's consistent, and you don't have that hard little spot or an extra stitch in there. So it's all consistent. So yes, this side of the sweater is seamed and done. And most sweater patterns tell you how to seam or what to seam first, what to seam next, what to seam, you know. If they do, great, follow it. If they don't, I normally seam shoulders first, arm next, but I don't complete the arm, and then I start up the side. So let's get started. Okay, after looking at my footage, I decided, okay, it's a little bit hard to see, so I whipped up some baby swatches to show you how to seam. So I knitted it up really big so that you could see that I am just taking the V part of the stitch that comes out into a V from one side. Again, I'm leaving the last stitch alone. I do that on purpose because I leave enough of a tail so that when I seam everything together, I can utilize this without having an extra bump or lump. So leaving that long tail so I can go back in and finish that off. I find the corresponding second. I do apologize, I am left-handed. I am very clumsy and klutzy when it comes to doing this. By George, I got it. So essentially, you'll see as you go along, let's get this next stitch picked up. Of course, I didn't have time to wash or block. You just mimicked a knit stitch. And you would do this on the first stitch. Right after your bind off here. Again, doing it in contrasting yarn to help you visually see what I'm trying to portray. And just picking up those two bars, and then going to the other side and picking up those Bars from the other side. Again, it's back and forth, back and forth. So that way here, when you pull it together, like magic, you'll have a nice crisp edge, and one stitch from either, well, your bind off from either side will be tucked in. And that is how you do the shoulder seaming. Again, I did it in contrasting yarn to show you, but if you pull this back out, essentially all you're doing is creating that knit stitch so it's seamless. And as again, I told you, it's easier to rip out pins than it is stitches. So pin first, sew later. So that's how you would do the shoulder seam. Like I said, all you're doing is recreating a knit stitch and seaming it together as if you would have live stitches. So all your rows from your shoulder would line up. Onward hoe to the next one. And again, you would leave extra on your pieces so that way here you don't have any extra ends to seam in. Now, I seamed my shoulder first, sleeve second. So this is a little different because knit stitches are taller than they are wider. So again, I apologize, this is not blocked at all. So with this one, as with what I do up my sides, is I pick up that bar on the main body and say this would be my sleeve. And of course mine was knit in the round. So I would pick up the bar on this one and I would pick up that V, your knit stitch. Now again, I'm just doing this for demonstration so that you see how it goes. Sometimes based on the curve of the sleeve, you may have to pick up an extra bar, but sometimes you don't. Depend. That's why, again, I pin, so I know and I can plan. Again, picking up that bar from this side. And I go and pick up my V from the knit on my sleeve. Pick up the bar, pick up the V. I'm going to do one more here. Pick up that bar, pick up that V. So it doesn't look like much, but again, let me pull this tight. And that's what that seam would look like. Again, it's only pulling in one of the stitches from either side, making it a nice uniform looking seam. And again, like I said, based on how many stitches you have per sleeve, to how much opening on a finished garment. And an adult garment may have more intricate, sleeve decreases and whatnot, and you can compensate for that by pinning the pieces together. All right, let's see. Yeah, that one. So Again, a different type of stitch. As I stated before, you have to recreate a purl stitch. Now this one might be a little daunting to most of you, and that's why I said I'll put the links in the description below, because what you're doing is essentially, if I would have slipped an extra stitch, I would have had a salvage edge, which you can always do. But these knit to knits are going to end up being inside the seam. So another reason why I did this, purl stitches have a top and a bottom. So this would be your bottom, this would be the top, and it corresponds with the other side. So what you have to do here to get this is you take your bottom from one side, and then that's why I knitted this really big for you, or bigger swatch. Top side. And then we go back in. Bottom. Top. I held two strands together. I don't have much leftovers of any kind of fat yarn around here. So trying to pick up both loops. All right, again, you can see the kind of zigzag, and then when you pull them together, you've created, well, when you pull this apart, you've created that same purl bump into your knit to knit. Again, you're going to see the contrasting yarn because I'm doing it in contrasting yarn. Again, I said this earlier, it's really simple. When seaming stockinette together, you just have to find that purl bar, that little bar in between the knit stitches, which again, I have two strands held together on this. So one side, and again, I knit this really loose, so hopefully you can see other side. And once you find your row, it's easy to keep it consistent so that you're not diving into the next row by accident. So back and forth you go. And you go bar for bar, so that way here you know if you did a row count, they'll all be equal. And all you're doing essentially is creating all the same type of loops but in different various places to recreate what kind of stitch that you need. And Nikki's like, that looks like a zipper. I'm like, exactly, you're just going to zip it up. Yep, got my thread differently there. So give it a pull. and it all goes away. It all looks consistent. I always give mine a little extra tug so it has some give and take. And look at that. Nice and consistent. And you'll see if, let's see if I can show you, all those bars that I picked up are consistent. Consistent. That makes a beautiful seam. I killed the battery. One battery down. But there you are. There you have it. That's how you would seam those together. And I do apologize for my clumsy, klutzy self here. But makes a beautiful seam. Woohoo, you made it through that. Yes, I like to talk. I killed one battery in my camera by doing that. I hope you learned something out of this. Even if you make yourself some baby swatches of a color and work with it. Again, links in the description below to the pattern for the baby sweater, as well as you can print out a cheat sheet for yourself so you can practice those different variances on getting that seam together. And no, I didn't hit my head this time, not yet at least. Watch, I'll probably hit my head after I shut this camera off. But again, something big is now in the works. Just gonna let you know. Please like, subscribe, as always. Hit the bell to be notified. When I post a new video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as I reached up to shut that camera off, I hit my head. Never fails.